Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the complex origins and, honestly, the shocking systemic failures behind one of history's most infamous serial killers. Today we're looking at Jeffrey Dahmer, who the media famously dubbed the Milwaukee Monster. But we're not just going to rehash the gruesome details here. We're going to use a socio-psychological framework to understand exactly how this happened. We'll look at the structural factors, the institutional negligence, and the deep-seated psychological issues that allowed this violence to just continue for over a decade.
So, how did a shy, isolated young man become one of the most notorious serial killers in history? And what on earth did police discover inside his apartment that shocked the entire world? You'll definitely want to stay until the end of this one to hear the full story of what authorities finally uncovered, because it completely reframes how we think about community safety and institutional bias.
Section 1. A troubled beginning. I want you to imagine growing up in a home filled with constant arguments, emotional neglect, and just fear. Dahmer's early childhood was relatively normal until he was about 6. He had double hernia surgery, and after that, he became highly withdrawn. His parents' relationship was incredibly unstable. His mother struggled with severe mental health issues and relied heavily on medication, while his father found it really difficult to build any sort of close emotional connection with him. When his parents finally divorced in 1978, his mother actually took his younger brother, leaving Dahmer behind. Experts believe this specific trauma deepened a profound underlying fear of abandonment. And by age 13, he was already abusing alcohol heavily to escape his emotional pain.
It was during this time that a seemingly innocent bonding activity took a really dark turn. As a teenager, Dahmer developed a disturbing fascination with dead animals. His father, who was a chemist, inadvertently fueled this by teaching him how to safely dissect roadkill and bleach the bones. What started as basic scientific curiosity eventually turned into a twisted obsession with death and control. It fostered early necrophilic tendencies, where death basically became a way for him to maintain companionship without the fear of rejection.
Section 2. The First Victim. Now, let's look at June 1978. Shortly after his high school graduation, and right in the immediate wake of being left behind during his parents' divorce, Dahmer committed his first murder. He invited an 18-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks back to his parents' empty home in Ohio. When Hicks eventually tried to leave, Dahmer panicked. Triggered by that deep, pathological fear of abandonment we just talked about, Dahmer attacked and killed him, before dismembering the body and disposing of the remains.
What's really wild is that after that first murder, he actually stopped killing for nearly 10 years. During this pause, he served a brief stint in the U.S. Army, though he was eventually discharged for his severe alcoholism, and later he moved in with his grandmother in Wisconsin. To the outside world, he appeared to be living a relatively normal life, but the urge to control, it never went away. And when the opportunity presented itself again, the floodgates opened.
Section 3. Systemic Failures and Bias. To really understand how the murders restarted in 1987 and then escalated so rapidly, we have to look at social disorganization theory. This is a sociological framework suggesting that when formal social control, like effective policing, is weak or biased, predators like Dahmer can easily slip through the cracks. Dahmer primarily operated in Milwaukee's marginalized inner-city neighborhoods. These were areas experiencing economic decline and systemic neglect, which provided the absolute perfect cover for him.
Listen, this wasn't just some cunning criminal mastermind outsmarting the detectives. This was a catastrophic failure of the system. Starting again in '87, his crimes became more frequent and way more disturbing. He intentionally targeted minority men, many from the LGBTQ+ community. Neighbors, particularly a black woman named Glenda Cleveland, repeatedly called the police reporting strange smells and highly suspicious behavior. But her complaints were just entirely dismissed. On top of that, the legal system actually had him in its grasp in 1989 for abusing a 13-year-old boy. But because he didn't fit their stereotype of a predator, he received a shockingly lenient work release sentence.
And then we get to the most heartbreaking incident of this systemic failure, which occurred in May 1991. A 14-year-old boy named Konarak Synthesome Phone managed to escape Dahmer's apartment, drugged, bleeding, and naked. Bystanders frantically tried to protect the boy and called the police. But when officers arrived, Dahmer calmly explained it was just a lover's spat. Blinded by bias and eager to avoid a same-sex matter, the police totally ignored the bystanders, didn't bother to verify the boy's identity, and literally walked the 14-year-old back to his killer. Tragically, the boy was murdered shortly afterward.
Section 4. Inside Apartment 213.
Everything finally ended on July 22, 1991. Dahmer had lured 32-year-old Tracy Edwards to his apartment, offering him money for photos. Edwards quickly realized the grave danger he was in. In a moment of just incredible bravery, he managed to escape the apartment with a handcuff still dangling from his wrist. He flagged down a passing police cruiser and led the officers right back to Dahmer's door, where they finally uncovered the truth.
Officers searched the apartment and uncovered one of the most horrifying crime scenes ever recorded in modern history. As the medical examiner noted, it was more like dismantling someone's museum than processing an actual crime scene. They found photographs documenting dismemberments, severed human heads inside the refrigerator, human remains scattered throughout the apartment, human skulls that were painted and preserved, and body parts stashed in a vat of acid. It was a terrifying shrine to his absolute control.
Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested that day and later confessed to murdering 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He admitted to cannibalizing his victims and keeping body parts as trophies, notoriously stating that eating their organs made them a part of him forever. Investigators also learned he was carrying out horrifying experiments on his living victims, attempting to create obedient zombies by drilling holes into their skulls and injecting chemicals right into their brains. Experts link this horrific sadism right back to that extreme, untreated manifestation of his lifelong fear of isolation and abandonment.
Section 5. Sane or insane?
The resulting trial wasn't about whether he committed the crimes, right? I mean, he had already confessed. The fierce debate was over whether he was legally sane. The defense argued he was insane, pointing to diagnoses like borderline personality disorder and uncontrollable compulsions. But the prosecution forcefully argued that he was perfectly sane. They proved he carefully planned his crimes, intentionally targeted vulnerable individuals without cars to evade tracking, and always committed his crimes in a strictly controlled environment. A legally insane person, they argued, doesn't have the forethought to lie so convincingly to police to cover their tracks.
While the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, 10 out of 12 jurors found him legally sane, resulting in a staggering sentence of 941 years in prison. His time in prison, however, was pretty short-lived. In November 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, who claimed Dahmer had been taunting others about his crimes.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought on our final slide. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is undoubtedly a story of extreme psychological disturbance, but it is equally a story of our collective, societal apathy. How does a society turn such a blind eye to the marginalized, allowing a killer to hide in plain sight for 13 years? What you should really take away from this explainer is the critical, life-or-death importance of listening to all community voices, especially those from marginalized backgrounds, and the absolute necessity of taking early mental health interventions seriously. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you and never underestimate the power of speaking up.